Up first, we have a game that's an undisputed classic. Many people love it. Many people consider it to be one of the best, if not the best game on the Super Nintendo. I've tried it a few times in the past. It was my first time ever being able to finally beat it. And that game is Super Metroid. So Super Metroid is actually the sequel to the first two games. The first one being Metroid on the NES, and the second game being on the Game Boy. And it was really the first game to refine and sort of define what was in the Metroidvania genre. If you're not familiar with Metroidvanias, you run around, you explore, filling in the map, and you gather items and skills that help you progress and get into other areas that were previously inaccessible. There's so many games based off this. Obviously, it's named after it. Metroidvania, Metroid, Castlevania, based off of it. So great. This is a very important game, but does it hold up? And I would say it definitely does. There's some issues with it, of course. Like most of the Metroid games, that the controls feel a little clunky, and Samus, the main character, she has like this strange sense of momentum that feels both kind of slippery and stilted at the same time. It's strange. You really have to get used to it. She builds up speed as she runs, and it can take a little time getting used to. And when she jumps, I just feel like she moves through the air in a way that's very difficult to predict. There are also some special moves in the game that they don't really outline very often or explain, that you kind of need to watch the intro to the game to get clues on when you need to do these, and they're required to progress through the game. Things like the wall jump, the grappling hook, the space jump, they can be unnecessarily difficult to pull off. There's a real trick to them, and it took me a while to get used to them. People that have played the game for years, will say they're easy to do, but let me tell you, if you haven't played them before, they are counterintuitive, to say the least. The game's cool. It has like this, atmospheric feel, this space horror theme series similar to Aliens. And it's cool as you're wandering around the map. There is music, but it's mostly kind of atmospheric. And sadly, while that's cool at first, I feel like the game does need a little bit catchier music to keep you entertained as you're backtracking through these same areas over and over again. Symphony of the Night really sort of mastered this with like a fantastic soundtrack that keeps you entertained. You want to go back through the areas just to hear the music. And this game's lacking that a little bit. And also it needs a fast travel system. There are lots of routes through the map, and the map's very convoluted. And there are lots of like one-way paths and times where you unlock a path and you have to like unlock it again every time you go through, which wastes a lot of time. And from the map, it's difficult to see where these areas are. So you'll spend time traveling from one area to another, only to realize that the route you've taken, you can't access the area you're trying to get to this way. You have to go around the other way, which I wasn't the biggest fan of. I ended up having to use a map that I found online, which I never like to have to do. I feel like it should be contained in the game. And the problem with that is the map in the game doesn't show you if a room is a dead end or if it has a door in it. It looks like a room. So sometimes you'll venture into this room thinking like, oh, it's going to lead to this other area because it butts up against it. But it doesn't. It's just a dead end. So you have to find a different path, and you end up going into the same rooms over and over and over again until you really learn the map. And some of the progression of the game is just a little bit too cryptic for me. I got stuck a lot of times not knowing really what to do, and I had to consult a guide. There are clues in the environment, and like I said, there are clues in the intro and stuff to help you, but man, sometimes they're a little obtuse, I have to say. This game really wants you to learn everything about it, just inside and out, and then basically get to the point where you can speed run it as fast as you can. As a matter of fact, there's different endings to the Metroid games based on how quickly you complete them and at what percentage you completed them, which is cool. That's fun, but I kind of feel like that should be a supplemental part of the game, not something the game is really built around. That being said, I got about 66% of the items without really using a walkthrough, except when I got stuck. So it was fun. Is it the greatest Metroidvania of all time? I don't think so. Like I said, I don't have a sense of nostalgia with this. This is really my first time beating it or spending more than just an hour with it. And I do think that it laid the groundwork for the games that came after it, but they improved on it. So it gets to that classic example is how do you rank something like being the greatest of all time? Is it based on its influence or how much it holds up now? And it reminds me of like the Chuck Berry versus the Beatles analogy where Chuck Berry came before the Beatles, and the Beatles were highly influenced by Chuck Berry. John Lennon even said that Chuck Berry was like his idol at one point. But would anybody ever say that Chuck Berry is better than the Beatles? I mean, maybe there's a few people out there that would do it, but I don't think overall the average person would say that they like Chuck Berry better than the Beatles. However, you wouldn't have the Beatles without Chuck Berry. So how do you rate it? Honestly, while it's not the greatest Metroidvania of all time, it is important, and I had a really fun time with it, even though I got stuck a few times. Still, I'd have to recommend it. If you like this style of game, this is the granddaddy of them all, and it still holds up really well. It's not perfect, and it has some flaws in it, but it's a great game. It's an 8 out of 10.